Hello everybody, Mr. Ong here. This is the second video on Stalin's impact on the Soviet Union. In this video, we'll be focusing on his political impact, asking ourselves the question, how did Stalin eliminate opposition and strengthen his hold on power? Just to remind everybody where we are at, this is a chapter on Stalin's impact on the Soviet Union. In the previous video, we had an introduction in which I shared about different ways we can evaluate the impact of a ruler, the impact of different policies. We looked at his aims, we looked at the short-term, long-term impact, we looked at how he had affected different individuals and different social groups. We also looked at the economic impact, studying the policies of collectivization, which has to do with farming, and industrialization, which has to do with things producing heavy industries like coal and iron. Where we left off in the previous video was that the reactions by Soviet society was negative because millions of people had died of starvation, and the political parties, the local party secretaries were having a lot of difficulties supporting the policies of collectivization and industrialization. And we left off wondering, what is Stalin going to do about this? And so that brings us to the political impact of Stalin. How is he going to stamp out opposition? How is he going to build support for himself? We will look at two different policies. The first one is that of the Great Terror, in which he purges, he gets rid of his political opponents and any Soviet citizen who could potentially oppose him. Secondly, we'll look at the use of propaganda. The third video will be on Stalin's social impact. Okay, so under political impact, we'll see the following. Under the Great Terror, we'll see that the impact will be on Stalin is that he's going to consolidate his rule, and he's going to become the unchallenged leader in the Soviet Union. On the other hand, it led to the loss of many capable leaders and intellectuals. This is clearly a negative impact on the Soviet Union. For propaganda, it boosted Stalin's authority and status. Nobody was going to be able to question Stalin as the leader of the Soviet Union. So this is a positive impact to Stalin. And this is a negative impact on the rest of the Soviet Union because it made opposition to Stalin even more impossible. Okay, so this is an overview of the chapter, of this section of the chapter. Okay, so where we left off, in the early 1930s, we noted that there were signs of growing opposition to Stalin's leadership even within the Politburo. In 1932, a former Moscow Party secretary, Ryutin, circulated a 200-page criticism of Stalin's dictatorship and was urging for his removal. And this is Ryutin himself. Okay, Moscow, if you didn't already know, played a very powerful role in the Soviet Union. And for this party secretary to have such a public condemnation or criticism of Stalin, it is bound to trigger a negative reaction on the part of Stalin. Now, but what exactly were they criticizing? They were criticizing his second 5-year plans because the first 5-year plans didn't go as smoothly as people had thought it was going to be, and they wanted to replace Stalin as a leader. Who did they want to replace him with? It is this gentleman by the name of Sergei Kirov, a senior Communist Party official, and he was being asked by some party members to replace Stalin. So in the minds of many, Kirov was actually a candidate to become the next general secretary of the party. And Kirov himself, he was personally loyal to Stalin, but he himself also had some terms in the second 5-year plan that he thought could be changed, he thought it could be replaced. Now what happens next? Kirov, this potential successor, potential challenger to Stalin's authority, became assassinated under mysterious circumstances. Many have speculated that Stalin was the one who engineered the assassination, who arranged for the assassination to take place. In any case, we don't know this for sure, but Stalin used this as an opportunity to consolidate his power and enforce party loyalty. He would claim that Kirov was assassinated by traitors within the Soviet Union, and it was Stalin's role to find out who these traitors were and to get rid of them. At least that's what he claimed. And that begins the period known as the Great Terror between 1934 to 1938. We can take a look at how this picture depicts Stalin. Here, Stalin is known as Stalin the Terrible. He's presiding over a table in which there are sheets of paper labeled death sentence, exile, and the reports of secret police. So this, the Great Terror was a period of time in which Stalin eliminated his political opposition and he removed domestic opposition to the Soviet government. Domestic opposition here refers to opposition by your average ordinary citizens. It was a terrible period characterized by show trials, arrests and interrogations, police surveillance. That means the secret police were everywhere trying to find out who was opposing Stalin, and very public execution. So over here in this picture, you see a lot of bodies hanging by the gallows. They were being executed at the hands of Stalin. So Stalin here is presumably responsible for the murders of all these people. Okay, so let's start off by talking about the purges and show trials that were part of the Great Terror. So Stalin used Kirov's death as an excuse to use the NKVD. Remember, the NKVD was Stalin's secret police to eliminate threats to the Soviet government and himself. And he eliminated his opponents like Kamenev and Zinoviev. We should recall that these were the key individuals from Stalin's rise to power by staging show trials in which they were forced to admit to crimes that they did not commit. And it was an absurd situation where at the court trials, lots of these Communist Party leaders would confess to being guilty of trying to betray their country and being a traitor in absurd confessions. Anybody who listened to the confessions would have been able to infer that they were confessing even though they were innocent. And this is likely due to they're being tortured or having their families threatened by Stalin. Okay. Eventually, many of the former Communist Party leaders would be executed at the hands of Stalin himself. So this is a picture showing the Central Committee of the Communist Party in 1917 and what happened to each and every one of them. Okay, so you'll notice that the ones in green, these ones in green, indicate individuals who died from natural causes. The ones in red and yellow, the ones in yellow, Mr. Ong's not so sure, but the ones in red, clearly, they were shot, they were assassinated, they died in prison, they were strangled. So out of all of these potential leaders that could have challenged Stalin for authority, Stalin was able to eliminate almost all of them through the purges, through the Great Terror. He didn't just purge and get rid of opposition within the political party, he also purged the Red Army. If we recall, Stalin was very fearful about the Red Army's links to Trotsky, who was the former war commissar. The effect of Stalin's purges, was that more than half of the experienced army officers and commanders were lost. They were either executed or they were thrown into the gulags. And in their place, because you still need people to run the army, you still need your generals, Stalin promoted younger, inexperienced people who were loyal to him. So the criteria for becoming an army officer and commander wasn't about your ability, wasn't about your competence, it was about whether you're loyal to Stalin. Okay? And the result of this, obviously, is that there was no strong leadership for these inexperienced soldiers, and it affected their ability to prepare for World War II. Other than purging the party and other than purging the Red Army, Stalin also does a widespread purge of Soviet society, your ordinary citizens. The NKVD, the secret police, they forced people to inform against their friends and family of anyone who voiced opposition to Stalin. To inform means to snitch or to tell on someone. The consequence of this was that anybody could be arrested for even a rumor or even just a neighbor saying, okay, he might have said something negative about Stalin. That was enough to get you sent into the gulags. And this resulted in the entire population being in a state of terror because nobody knew when it was safe to talk or who they could talk to. And close to 39 million people were executed and 3 million people imprisoned in the forced labor camps. This is extremely horrendous, and Stalin is many people have considered Stalin a monster because of this. So on the effect on the Soviet Union is probably negative, but on Stalin, he became extremely powerful because of the purges and show trials, because ultimately nobody would dare to oppose or challenge him. Okay. This is a further elaboration, the loss of intellectuals, skilled workers and officers. You can read this for yourself. I think the pertinent one that I want you guys to remember would be the effect of the purge of the Red Army and commanders. So this is a very key example you can use to talk about the political impact of Stalin. Yeah. So where purges were used to eliminate opposition to Stalin, Stalin uses propaganda to build support for himself. And the idea here is, if Stalin could brainwash you to reshape what you think is true, then Stalin could make the Soviet people believe in whatever he wanted them to believe in. Now, how does he do that? Through propaganda. Okay, how he does that is through the rewriting of Soviet history, the changing of the textbooks. So he rewrites history to make it seem that he was Lenin's rightful successor. If we recall the earlier part of the chapter when we studied the rise of Stalin, Trotsky was the one who was initially favored to be Lenin's successor because he was very charismatic, he was brilliant, he was very popular with the Red Army and the masses. But here, Stalin's going to rewrite history to make him seem that Trotsky was going to be described negatively, but Stalin is going to be seen as the natural successor. So pictures and propagandas of Stalin were placed in places like offices, factories, and classrooms. Okay, if you see this in your source-based questions for the exam, some of the common themes that will appear is the appearance of Lenin appearing to bless Stalin. Okay, so Stalin will appear large in the foreground, and Lenin somewhere in the background looking favorably on Stalin. Okay. And this is one of the earliest instances of Photoshop. So Stalin will also edit photos to remove unwanted people. So this dude on the left, he probably got purged for some cocked up charges against Stalin, and he is removed from the photo. Okay. Other than portraying himself to be a successor to Lenin, he also portrayed himself as a father figure to his people and described himself as a wise leader. So all of the things that went well with the USSR, all of the achievements, all of the successes were credited to his leadership, and all of the failures, for example, the failures of collectivization, he blamed it on the kulaks. He blamed it on the traitors like Bukharin, like Kamenev, like Zinoviev. They were the ones responsible for the failures, and he was the wise leader who the Soviet Union needed to rely on to survive. Okay, the result of this, the impact of this, was that many people became convinced to support Stalin's policies and worship him, thereby helping him to remain in power.